Welcome back to our Succession podcast. This week we are talking about Season 3, Episode 8, Chiantishire. We are finally in Italy.
We are finally in Italy, and finally in things that critics have not seen like several weeks ago. We are like this close to actual critics when they're watching the episode.
Yes, we are all on the same playing field now. We're not going to get taunted about, just wait until you see this now. Although there was some taunting this week, which was very unfortunate. I was acting like the most oppressed person in the world all week because I didn't get to watch it live. I had to watch it like 45 minutes late because of my job. And I was like, my life is so hard.
Your life is very hard. That was a very personal attack on you, specifically the week when everyone was saying you have to watch this live.
I know, it was the only time I couldn't watch it live, and it was the week when every single blue check on Twitter was like, if you really love Succession, you'll watch this episode live. And I was like, fuck you.
Some people have jobs that aren't like giving opinions on Twitter, so...
Get them. Anyway, we are in Italy. We are enjoying the view, and Caroline is back, who is one of my favorite minor characters. Whenever she's around, I just love it, and this was a great episode for her.
Caroline is very underrated, and she seemed to me a lot more relaxed here than she has in her previous appearances, which I think is because, before she was like at Shiv's wedding, or Shiv and Roman were coming to talk to her about her shares. But here they have invited themselves to her wedding, which I think is just a great time for her.
And I thought it was kind of funny, the things that Rowan was saying about her fiancé, Peter Munyon. A lot of it sounded pretty similar to Logan, especially he kept saying that he had 2 wives and 4 kids. I'm like, you know who else that describes? Except he has 3 wives? Your dad.
Roman didn't seem aware of the irony at all, though he did point out that Caroline definitely has a type. Roman was very sweet in his scene with Caroline, I thought. Roman is a burgeoning fascist right now, but he is still very concerned about his mom, which I think is just the depth of this show.
It's cute. Early in the episode, Comfrey mentioned to Kendall that there was a podcast. She mentions a few different things that they're digging into about the history of the Roy family and the curse of the Roys. So she mentions Connor's mom, Rose, which is Logan's sister, and the waiter from the wedding. And I think what's so interesting about that list is that we don't know very much about Connor's mom or Rose, but we know a lot about the waiter. We saw it happen. So it's just kind of interesting to think that there are these other stories out there that might be as dramatic and similarly tragic, and we just don't know the full scope of what actually happened.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about the people in this world speculating about all this, that there are all these Reddit conspiracy theories about, Connor's mom, for instance.
Yeah.
This felt to me like a very obvious dangling thread that, we're going to get into this more later, but I don't see what the point of this was if Kendall is dead. I'm just going to say that.
We're going to kind of go chronologically through the episode as we usually do. So we'll do our whole "is Kendall dead?" discussion at the end of this episode, but to kind of, give ourselves away a bit, I also don't really think that he's dead. I don't think that he's dead. And one of the main reasons why is that we haven't really had a conclusion to this manslaughter plot, and it's been brought up so often, especially in this season. So it just seems like it has to be going somewhere, and I don't know what that plot would look like if he was dead. It would not feel like the same.
No, the murderer is dead, the story's over.
Yeah, okay, well, shoot.
Can't prosecute him now.
Let's do location.
Venice, St. Bart's, the Maldives. Has she heard of these locations? She must be aware of them.
So I have 2 locations I want to talk about. The first is that most of this episode was filmed at Villa La Foce. That is the estate that Caroline and everyone are staying at. It's where the garden party is held. It has 5 houses, so a great estate if you're a rich person who wants a nice European getaway, and particularly when you want to keep your son far away from everyone else. Just give him one of his own houses, and they'll stay in all the others. The other location I want to shout out is that Roman visits Lucas at Villa La Casinella, which is in Lake Como.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Stewie. Someone finally saw the value in Lake Como.
Somebody finally got to Lake Como.
It's a 9-bedroom, 10-bath estate, which is only accessible by boat. It's very private.
Yeah, I was curious about that location. That was the one that jumped out to me. So I Googled it a little bit and was looking at it. I just loved how the locations were treated. I mean, this show isn't a show that often lingers over beauty, but there was maybe a little bit of that in this episode, a little bit more than there usually is. Although I liked in the scene with Roman and Mattson because it was like one of the most beautiful scenes we've had in the show. I kept like trying to get a glimpse of it like in the shots, but they made it kind of hard to like see where they were and to like really get a view of things. That was kind of fun. And they, they had their little ironic like, oh yeah, let's look at the view. Yeah, boats and water, huh? Very unimpressed.
That's classic Succession, just going to one of the most beautiful locations in the world and like, we're just going to show it in the corner of the shot, have fun trying to...
Right. We are not going to give you any kind of lingering shot of this so you can really soak it all in because the characters aren't impressed, so you don't get to see it. So Connor and Willa have a conversation that seems like it's going in the direction of him breaking up with her for his political career, but then he kind of pivots at the last moment and says, well, Maxim had an idea, and that's that I should propose to you. Very romantic.
Very romantic. Make him the most bulletproof candidate. Like,
my buddy said I should ask you to marry me.
I said no out loud when the scene started. Like, this is something... Yeah. This is a conversation that has been coming for a while, but I still don't think it's a good idea. Like, his career is going nowhere. At most, I think he can get, like, a smaller level political position that he'd probably get bored of. So, yeah. I think he should just give it up and keep the, hot girlfriend.
Why do you actually want this, Connor? I mean, I know you just want approval and you want to be seen as a serious person, but this is like you're doing the opposite of that.
He's like, my dad really relies on and respects, well, definitely relies on the president, so I will just become president.
And then he'll have to talk to me because I'm the president.
Then all my family will be calling me all the time. That's actually why Connor's doing this.
That's what he's doing. He just wants to talk to his family more often, so he's like, I guess I have to become the president.
That's so sad.
Aww.
Willow seemed very panicked in this scene. I mean, she has grown very fond of Connor, and I think also he is bankrolling her, so it would be a big deal if she turned him down, and he was like, okay, have a nice life.
So Kendall asks Logan to meet with him, and I liked, especially with what happens later in the episode, how Roman is so defensive of Logan in this scene and like putting himself physically between them and like repeating everything that Logan says.
It was very sad. Like, you're gonna have your 5'6" son protect you from your other son, who is not all that intimidating either.
Roman kind of said like Kendall might try and stab you or something, and Logan was like, oh, I'm not scared. But he ended up suspecting that Kendall might be trying to poison him at the actual dinner, so he might be a little scared. He didn't seem not scared.
And we kind of laughed at the kids for thinking the donuts might be poisoned, but now Logan is doing the same shit.
Let's do burn of the week.
That's not a good retort. Don't fucking laugh at that.
My burn of the week was when Caroline said about her fiancé, he's got a big heart, and Shiv responded, well, I suppose opposites attract. I love how many issues that Shiv has with her mom, like specifically of the siblings. Roman seems to maybe be like a bit of a mama's boy, but Shiv is just like, she's terrible. And she called her Scary Poppins earlier in the episode, which is also just a funny turn of phrase. So yeah, I enjoyed that line.
That was a great burn. So my favorite burn this week came from Tom. I think this is the first time I've highlighted Tom. The man dying of thirst is suddenly a mineral water critic.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Tom and Shiv are almost never mean together. Like, it's usually Shiv being mean to Tom or Tom being mean to Greg because Shiv was mean to Tom. I thought it was very cute how they ganged up on him here.
Yes, that was a very cute bonding moment for them.
Yeah.
They should bully people together more often. It might help their relationship.
Just a cute couples activity for them.
So the scene between Shiv and Caroline was so good. I've always been interested in these two because we haven't had really a long scene with just the two of them, but there's all these little hints that they have like a more kind of intense relationship than, you know, some of the other combinations of, you know, people in this family. And I think that their relationship seemed kind of similar to like Kendall and Logan's relationship, and these two scenes kind of mirrored each other in a way, because I think like Shiv is Caroline's favorite, which is like not necessarily a good position for her to be in. It's a lot of pressure. I think a lot of people think, including Brian Cox, thinks that Shiv is Logan's favorite. And I'm like, I'd like to respectfully disagree with you, Mr.
Sorry,
Cox.
Brian Cox.
I think that Kendall is clearly the favorite because he's just obsessed with Kendall. Like, they have this like really strong bond that is sort of destructive, but that comes from like having those feelings of like, I want you to be like me and I want you to love me, and you're the one that I have the most like respect for, so I like expect a lot of you. Whereas Shiv, I don't think he respects her as much, so he doesn't really put as much pressure on her.
Yes, I totally agree. I think that Logan is the most invested in Kendall.
Yeah.
Which I think is a form of love. I mean, the Ladybird love and attention being the same thing. He doesn't really give Shiv a lot of attention. Like,
yeah.
The kind of kid that Logan wants is the kind of kid who has killer instinct and would try to go on a press conference and kill him. Mm-hmm. Like, that's what he actually respects and wants.
Yeah, and then bringing that back to Shiv and Caroline, I think it's a similar thing where, from Shiv's point of view, her mom was very absent and was very cold to her, and she doesn't really believe that she has any feelings, and Caroline really showed in this scene like how much she really did care and how much like those things hurt her. And it was really sad, but also at a certain point I was like, wow, I'm getting a lot of Sharp Objects vibes from this, because it was just like kind of very toxic mother-daughter stuff, especially when she said that she wished that she'd never had kids and implied or sort of outright said that Shiv would not be a good mom.
It was a lot. This is the most emotional scene we've gotten from Caroline. No one on the show is ever on the same page about the past. They go into what happened when Caroline and Logan got divorced and custody was in question. And they can't even agree on like what age Shiv was. I mean, obviously this was Caroline's decision. I think that's pretty safe to say. And I think that now that she's having regrets about a lot of things about her past, she's kind of rewriting the memory a bit. Like, she contradicts herself even just in this scene, going from saying that she wanted the kids to keep their inheritance to saying that it was Shiv's choice, which is just awful. You were 13 and you knew how to twist a knife was just a
The thing about the age was really, that was quite the line, like, that Shiv remembered herself being more like helpless in this situation. And, you know, whether she was 10 or 13, it's still too young to, I think, really be held accountable for a decision like that, and to be assigned that kind of cruelty of, like, that you were trying to hurt me by choosing your dad. Like, oof.
No, legally it wasn't her decision at all.
Yeah.
She's just very insulting toward her in this scene. It's also kind of weird how she assumes that Shiv has decided not to be a mother when she's, like, early 30s, maybe.
One of the things that also kind of mirrors like the Logan and Kendall scene is the way that in that scene, like, Logan is like trying to say that Kendall is a lot like him, like, you're my son and it's who you are. And in this scene, you know, Caroline kind of does the same thing where she says that they're similar, like neither of them are fit to be mothers is what she basically says. And Shiv and Kendall, that's not what they want to hear. Neither of them want to be like their parents in that situation, so they kind of reject it.
That's a really good point. And I think there is something kind of self-centered about it, especially in the Shiv Caroline scenes, since she's not really perceiving where Shiv is at least on a conscious level, to be like, oh, you're exactly like me, even though there are some similarities. And in the case of both Shiv and Kendall, like, that just shoves them all the way in the other direction of needing to prove how unlike their parents they are, which just kind of does prove how like their parents they are.
Yes, exactly, because then Shiv is like, I'm not going to be Caroline, I'm going to be Logan. It's good choice, it's kiddo. So crazy that her takeaway from this conversation is like, oh my god, that was No, that's the opposite of what you should have done. Where she's like, I'm just gonna prove you wrong.
Very mature of you, Shiv.
Well, I am gonna have kids because how dare you tell me I can't? And a great line from this scene that I think is very insightful is that Caroline says about Logan, he never saw something he loved that he didn't want to kick it just to see if it would come back.
Yeah.
So perfect for really all of Logan's relationships. I think, obviously Kendall, Shiv even makes the comparison herself and says, Dad can kick me as many times as he wants. It's like, that's also not the takeaway you should have taken from that. But that's fine. And I like the idea that Caroline has kind of been through it with Logan, and she's no longer kind of like taken in by his charms. Obviously, they're divorced. So she has this view of him where she kind of sees through it, and they probably should listen to her when it comes to Logan. I would think she might be a good source of insight, but they're not really able to.
Yeah, I think she could be a good source on that for them, if nothing else. This quote for me kind of reverberated throughout the episode, like you can see it also in the Shiv-Caroline dynamic and in the Tom-Shiv dynamic. Like, Jessie has said in interviews that the show is first and foremost about trauma, and I think in this episode you could really see the sense of generational trauma. Now they're all just mimicking this, tendency of Logan's.
Yeah, that's so true, because of course the way that Shiv treats Tom in this episode is like so perfectly that dynamic, and you can kind of get the sense that that's the appeal for her, is like to see how far she can push things with Tom. It's time for number one boy.
You're my boy. You're my number one boy.
So my number one boy for this week is Kendall. I thought about trying to hold off one more week because Kendall is going to be in next week's episode, but I was really...
Yes, which is going to be a dream sequence of his life as he's dying, and we won't know whether or not he died until season 4. That's my theory.
As he's dying, and he's surrounded by a bunch of other people who have died throughout the show, and they're all sitting around a table, and Jenny and I are just being really creative here. We aren't stealing this from anything.
That's what's going to happen.
And so anyway, he will be in next week's episode, but I was really feeling it this week. The last time I chose Kendall was in Lion in the Meadow, and I made the bold claim that I did not think Kendall was going to come crawling back to his dad, asking to be part of the family and company again, and I was right. Kendall has been exiled from his own mother's wedding and is very much the cast-off daughter of the family, but rather than beg for forgiveness, he recognized that going back would only cause him more pain and asked to get out. I don't think that this is ever going to happen for him, but as always, I love Kendall for trying.
Yeah, I agree and feel all of that. My number one boy this week is Roman. And before I say anything, and I don't know why this is the week where I feel like I have to justify myself, because you guys should know this by now, but I have bad taste. I love all the characters in Succession. I know sometimes people are like, I hate all the characters, or I really hate, Roman, or I hate a couple of them. I'm like, no, I love all of them. I don't even care. Even Logan sometimes. I don't care. They're all funny, and they're all great, and they're all my evil family members. So, that being said...
If it makes you feel any better, Roman was actually my runner-up, so we are on the same page.
This is a great Roman episode. And I don't know why this is the episode where I feel like I have to justify
You're valid.
this. But... because he didn't even do anything that bad in this episode, but he's been on sort of a bad streak lately, which I've loved. I think this is some of the most interesting Roman stuff that we've seen in the entire show, the past 3 episodes. It's just great. I've been loving him so much. I've been thinking about Roman a lot for the past 48 hours. My life is in shambles. So anyway, what I want to say about Roman is he's been doing really well. He's been kind of on that confidence upswing, and he did well in this episode. He talked to Matsson. He was kind of charming in his weird way. He was able to read the situation and made a really good pitch to his dad. I think he knows how to pitch ideas like that to his dad and frame it in a way that sounds appealing to him. And then he got approval from both his mommy, Jerry, and his daddy, his actual father, and which is for him was probably everything to him. And it's just so sad that he then ruined it with a completely unforced heir. Especially after Jerry asked him to not send dick pics to her anymore. That he was like, I'm going to do it in this conference room with like several of my family members and business acquaintances also here. What a little shit. I know it's going to have worse consequences for Jerry than it is for Roman, but I think he really feels that, and you can really see just the shame and guilt in his face, and the way that he reacts to it just really made me feel for him. It's like the most humiliating thing that I think could happen to him, and see him trying to save face with his dad. I don't know, it was just like really heartbreakingly human, and I just really love Roman. I don't know, that's all I can say. He's my number one boy.
I think it's very empathic of you that you tend to feel the most like for your number one boys in the moments when they're at their most like humiliating. I think it reflects well on you.
I'm like, when somebody is down, I just want to give them a hug and pick them back up. So, yeah. Roman. Love that kid. Okay, so the Kendall and Logan scene, absolutely amazing. You know, I've said before that these two, their relationship is my favorite part of the show if I had to choose like one single thing. Their scenes together are always among my favorites, and this is like no different. This was just like a masterclass of a scene.
This was absolutely the scene of the episode. And from the very beginning, it kind of broke my heart the way that Kendall, well, he worked hard to get someone else to work hard to prepare food that Logan could actually eat. He, went to Marco and said, hey, check in with my dad's doctor, probably in a very aggressive way, which shows he cares about Logan.
It's the thought that counts.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to hurt Logan, as he said.
Yep. He does have just the tip, but for killing Dad. Like, he doesn't actually want to kill Dad.
Oh, exactly. He doesn't actually want to kill Dad. And I think one of the heartbreaking things about this scene is that, like, they both have this twisted view of each other here, where, like, Logan is suspecting that Kendall would do something awful. And Kendall is like, I would never do that to you. Who do you think I am? But at the same time, you know, Kendall is like, you're evil. They're at this point where they still love each other, but they can, you know, they're never going to mend things.
No.
Nor should they.
No.
But
I think Logan at least is being very honest in this scene, and you can see how much he loves Kendall, but I don't think Kendall has any awareness of this. I think he would say that Shiv is Logan's favorite, for sure.
he has said that.
Yeah.
Logan asked if Iverson is getting better, which quite insulting, since I think it's been implied that Iverson is autistic.
And I think this is the first, or at least the most explicitly, they have addressed Iverson having autism. I think they definitely mentioned it more explicitly in interviews.
And it was clearer when he was around more often, like in season 1. It was like, it definitely seemed to be the implication of some of those scenes. It is nice that Kendall actually wants to take the offer and leave, which is a really big step for him to get to this point where he's just wants to cut ties. It seems like the most healthy thing he could do, but it's also just so painful because who is he? And he even says, I don't really know where my life goes from here.
It was very mature of him. I think a very common point of discussion, like in the fandom, is who among the siblings is the most like Logan? Who was acting like him in this episode? Connor, I feel, comes up the least because he has, separated himself from Waystar and all that. So I was thinking about that here because Kendall knows that if he stays, he's just going to keep echoing Logan. That's what happens to people who stay.
And he says, I don't want to be you, which is a great line, I think, for him to recognize the ways that they are similar. He's really clinging to the idea that he's a good guy at heart, which, I mean, fair. To give that up completely, I don't think is even necessarily helpful in growth and becoming better, to just be like, I am a piece of shit through and through. Because he's not, but I think it was pretty bold of him to say those things to Logan, who obviously knows the worst thing he's done in his life.
Yeah, I think to give up on the idea of yourself being a good person, like, at heart, then you're basically just giving up on your potential to grow, I think. He needs more awareness about the things that he has done. In particular, he does not seem aware that he's also a shitty dad, just like Logan.
Yes, exactly.
But keep believing that you have some good in you, Kendall, because I think you do too. So Logan never really wanted or expected Kendall to take this deal. Everything pretty much is a play for Logan. He says, maybe I want you close, which I believe is true. I think also that there isn't really an ideal CEO situation for Logan right now. Like, Connor is out. He has never wanted it to be Shiv. I refuse to believe that. He doesn't want it to be a girl. And then Roman just kind of gets it by default, which is not something that I think Logan wants. He wanted someone to fight for it, and Kendall's the only person who has ever really shown himself capable of that.
Yeah, Kendall's the one that's most comfortable just like openly wanting things. Shiv has played at not wanting it for her whole life until she thought she had it, and then she showed how much she really actually wanted it. But then she kind of, packed all that back up again when it was like taken away from her again, because she's like, oh, I'm not going to get that, vulnerable again. And Roman, I mean, he says he wants it, but
does he?
I don't even think he actually does. I think he wants what it represents and wants the approval and wants to prove himself, but
yeah, I think
if he actually wants
get the approval without the CEO position, he'd be happy. Like, he could stand for a substitute, but you're right that Kendall, this whole show, has been like, this position, I was born for this, I want it, I'm going to take it.
And yeah, I mean, a lot of lines in this scene were just very directly, I think, saying some of the themes of the show when he says, you won because you're corrupt and so is the world. I think it's true. And it's kind of funny the way that Kendall lays all this out, of the way that Logan's been able to make money off of people's worst impulses and by stirring up like resentments. And Logan's like, oh, you just noticed that.
Yeah, really pointing out Kendall's privilege, and Kendall's like, yeah, maybe I did, which I guess at least a little is kind of acknowledging it. Logan's response is kind of horrifying, just like owning these terrible things he's done for his career. He also says, like, I fucking know things about the world, or I wouldn't turn a buck. Like, it's very confident, and made me think of the whole, sect of this fandom that is convinced Logan is kind of a mastermind playing 40 chess games. Like, I feel like this very much showed that Logan buys into his own hype.
I think that Succession both shows the way that the system benefits people like Logan, as well as the limits of like behaving like that. So it's a little more complicated. Like, yes, he has achieved a lot of, success in his life, but kind of looking at what that means and how he got there, and like, is it worth it? And is this actually something that we should be, rewarding in our economic system? And then saying very firmly, no, no, it's not.
Exactly.
It's not a neutral show, that's for sure. And the moment of this scene is when Logan, the mic drop moment of this scene is when Logan plays the manslaughter card, which is a card he's had in his pocket for a long time. And it is interesting how long it's taken him to use that. And we kind of knew he would never use it in like a legal blackmail sense, because he can't use it without taking himself down. But this was really the perfect time for him to drop that, when Kendall is going on about how he's a good person and how he'll never be like his dad, for him to just remind Kendall of the things he doesn't want to think about and talk about.
Oh yeah, and I think the fact that they haven't talked about it and kind of had this silent agreement, we're just never going to talk about this again, gave it so much more impact. I was crying a little when he played this card. And then he goes into asking if Kendall wanted to fuck the caterer.
Yeah.
Which is just so much to process.
It's always the homophobia with Logan.
Always.
It's interesting. I don't think he actually thinks that of Kendall. It was just like twisting the knife in a really cruel way.
I think it's like when you add the word like cunt to an insult just to, for some flavor, because that's what homophobia is to Logan.
Yeah, it's just a little bit of extra spice on my insults of my children.
With Kendall's drug use in the show so far, there is sometimes a homoerotic subtext to it, like particularly with Stewie.
In
Yes,
the
I was gonna
bathroom
say.
season. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, the gestures they did and the kind of euphemisms that they allude to about, like, going to a bathroom together to do drugs, it does not seem like that's what they're alluding to at all. And this is the first time the show has really addressed that. I did not expect anyone to point this out.
One of the questions I would love to ask Jesse Armstrong if I ever got to have a conversation with him, and I would say, well, first I would just, like, say how much I love and appreciate his work. And then I would say in a very non-judgmental way, can we talk about Logan's homophobia for a second? Because there's so much. And I don't know if you guys have read the draft pilot script for the show, which if you haven't, you should read the scripts. They're great. I really recommend it.
Yes, the season 1 finale is also available online.
Yes. So the season 1 finale is the production script, so it's more like the complete version, but the pilot is a draft version, so it's really interesting to see how much changed and what changed. And one of the things that really struck me about reading it was how much more, like, Logan homophobia there was, and also how some of it was very, like, self-directed in, like, a toxic masculinity way, which I think is what it boils down to, is that it's just another way of reinforcing, like, masculinity. But there was a line in that script where he was trying to tell Marcia, his wife, that he loves her, and he kind of hedged a little bit and was like, I'm like, you know how I am, Marcia, like, I'm not a queer, but, and then he was like, but I, like, love you, or whatever. Like, he eventually was able to say it. And it's just, I was like, what a line. Like, fellas, is it gay to love your wife?
No homo, but I, a man, love this woman.
Like, that, I liked that because I feel like we don't see a lot of how messed up, like, Logan is about himself in a way. Like, it seems like he always is turning that on other people. So it was interesting to see that line where he's kind of always monitoring his own emotions and making sure that he's always seeming very, like, masculine.
So Logan kind of ends his mic drop with, "and I'm a bad person," which I think speaks to how for both Kendall and Logan, their worst fear is being a bad person. Like, they really need to maintain the self-image that they are the good guy of every situation.
I mean, most people do, which kind of comes back to, like, it's not helpful to give up on a view of yourself as, like, a good person at heart, because then, like, where do you go from there? So I think it's very realistic that Logan thinks he's in the right. I mean, he's like, I've done right by my family, and I protected my son from this mistake that he made, and this is the thanks I get. Like, you can kind of see his point of view there, is that he's just like, this is so ridiculous that my son is going to sit here and say how evil I am after everything I've done for him.
Yeah, you can absolutely see, like, the rationale in his mind, which is a testament to the writing.
Yeah, these are the type of scenes that it's like, we couldn't have this without the seasons of groundwork that they've laid, and I'm just really glad that we're at this point where we get these scenes that are so intense and there's so much going on, and, building upon hours and hours and hours of these relationships that we've watched. It's quite the payoff. I'm happy to be here. It's time for Let Them Eat Cake.
Let us eat cake.
My Let Them Eat Cake moment was when Caroline said of her fiancé, "He's not posh. His father's a doctor, and he bought all his own furniture." The fact that, like, those are her supporting pieces of evidence, because I guess if you're not, like, tied to the royal family, you're not posh. It's like, his father's a doctor. He's working class. Come on. And he bought all his own furniture is, like, such a bizarre statement. I'm not quite sure what that even means, but I love that. And I love that the Roy children are a product of both, like, English old wealth and American new wealth. I think that's a great combination for them to have, and all the issues that come with both of them.
So my Let Them Eat Cake moment came from Lucas. So when he's talking about his estate, it kind of freaks me out, to be honest. Now I'm sleeping on a camping mat on the floor until I get a deep dive on the best mattress in the world.
That's a great one.
It's so funny to me because I think everyone watching is like, this is a fucking gorgeous place. Would love to stay here.
Yeah, just the idea, like, you have to have the best thing or you can't have anything. So Shiv and Tom had a lot of development in this episode that was quite interesting to watch unfold. So as we kind of mentioned, Shiv comes back from her talk with her mom with the absolute worst things that she could have taken away from it, which is that, one, she's going to have a baby out of spite, always the best reason to bring a human into the world, and two, that she is going to let her dad continue to kick her and keep coming back. That's empowerment.
That's empowerment.
Hashtag girl boss.
Feminism is making your husband think you may not even love him at all and could potentially screw him over in his career.
That just emotional bombshell dirty talk was one of the wildest things I have ever seen. There were probably 5 separate times in this episode that I screamed a little bit, and this was one of them when she just said, "Even though I don't love you," with that little smile on her face. And it's just so insane because I'm like, I think you mean that a little bit, Shiv.
I think she wants it to be true, if nothing else. I think she does love him. I think you can see it in scenes when she's not with Tom. You can see when she's hiding her face in their scene on the beach in This Is Not for Tears. You can see her, asking her dad to not send Tom to jail. But she doesn't want to love Tom, and she definitely doesn't want him to think she loves him.
She wants to have that power over him and to keep kicking him and see how long he will continue to come back.
It's a vulnerability, like we see with the boys. They can't show any weakness, or they'll get called gay. They're probably going to get called gay either way. And since Shiv is a girl, she has to take that even further.
Shiv has worse, toxic masculinity than any of her brothers do.
Yes.
Yes, I'm a girl. Yes, I have toxic masculinity. She's so funny. And then I think one part that I loved from it was that it did seem like Tom. I mean, they were very close in his face after she said, "Even though I don't love you." And I think Tom seemed maybe a little bit turned on by it.
It got pretty hot after that.
It was, yeah, I think there was a part of him that was hearing his worst insecurities just plainly laid out like that could be somewhat freeing and could be, an interesting thing to, delve into. But obviously the fact that he didn't know it was coming and that they have not negotiated any of this, and that he doesn't get any reassurance the next day that, "Oh no, I actually do love you." It's not something you can throw out in this context in a kinky way. It does not work.
No, it would explain a lot about the relationship if Tom is turned on by being put down by that.
Yeah.
And I mean, the show is very good at acknowledging that some people have kinks. Like Rome and Jerry, they've got their own leg, and now Tom apparently is turned on by this.
I love just the sex in this show is just so weird. It's very unsexy sex.
The sexiest scenes on the show are not the sex scenes. She acts like he basically asked for this, when I don't think anyone who's asking their partner for dirty talk would expect to hear, "I don't love you."
Yeah, that's insane. It's so funny, but it's so dark. It's just, she really just came out there with, "I don't love you." I got just the thing for you, Tom. Yeah, and then I think the next morning, just the way she kind of will retreat back from any attempt at vulnerability and just goes back to her gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss mode on Tom, and treats him like he's crazy and manipulative for being concerned about what happened last night is just that really felt like a new low to me. I was watching this alone and I said, "Shiv!" really loudly, because I was just girl, what? You're gonna say he's manipulative for bringing it up again and being "Can we talk about that?" Ooh.
It was so much. And Shiv clearly does not want to have a baby. I don't know if she's fully admitted this to herself, but I think it's very obvious.
Yeah.
And she spends the whole time, yes, if she really wants a baby, but she spends the whole time really talking about all the scenarios in which they wouldn't actually have a baby.
Well, yeah, one of us might die or go into a coma, or we could get divorced, or there's all these other things. And, maybe in 10 years we can see how we feel about it.
if that's what you're worried about, if you're thinking about divorce.
You're the one that wants to get divorced, Tom, not me.
After bringing it up herself, like, it is legitimately gaslighting.
She also says to him, I may not love you, but I do love you, which feels to me like a callback to their conversation on their wedding night in season 1 when they're talking about what love is, and Tom goes, love is bullshit, but I do love you. So I guess that's the most like generous interpretation of that line, is that that's maybe like a weird little inside joke between them.
They talk a lot about love as a concept, like in the beach scene, Tom's like, what is love? I love this rock. And then he does the whole withholding thing in the first half of this season about saying I love you. I think they kind of use it as a placeholder for a lot of things. They both love each other, and instead of talking about what any of their actual issues are, they just kind of play sometimes with, haha, I don't actually love you, but I do love you.
Let's do Candy Baby.
Ugh. Hot. Ugh.
So, my candy baby for this episode is also Kendall. During the hiatus, some photos came out of Jeremy with a shaved head, and there was speculation over whether filming had stopped and Jeremy had shaved his head, or this was Kendall with a shaved head. I'm very glad Kendall shaved his head. It's a great look for him, and the earth tones he was rocking this episode really completed the look of having just come back from the front.
I love the shaved head. I don't know why it works so well, but it really does. So my candy baby is Caroline.
Yay!
She's my number 1 MILF. I love her. Let us know in the comments, who is your number 1 MILF of the show? Is it Jerry, Marsha, or Caroline? Those are your 3 options.
Maybe could include Rhea.
Oh, Rhea. I forgot about Rhea. Okay, yeah, Rhea. We'll throw Rhea in there for sure. But Caroline is my favorite, and she was back at the top of her game in this episode. That little Laura Dern in Jurassic Park outfit she was rocking with her conversation with Kendall. Very formative outfit in my childhood. And later on, her little robe number that she was wearing for her bachelorette party and just like chain smoking on the roof. And she was having fun at her own wedding, which is a good look. I'm happy for her. After the Matsson deal, Roman comes back. He pitches it pretty well. He earns a good job text, both from Jerry and Logan. It's a great day for him. I think he needs some positive reinforcement. He just needs attention. And then it just immediately spirals into like one of the most hilarious scenes in the show, but also like just the way the show will do like a comedy setup, but then like kind of twist it in a way so it's also like just weirdly heartbreaking.
It was very heartbreaking,
Yeah.
like how uncomfortable Roman was in the interrogation with Logan. And Logan was kind of like trying to shut him down, basically. Like he's kind of asking, so what is this, were you abused? But also he's wanting the answer to be, no, I'm completely normal.
His facial expressions in this scene were just all-timers. It was quite the face journey, both when he realizes what happened, when Logan leaves the room, and then later talking to Logan, just the way he kind of starts off with some bluster. He's kind of like, yeah, Dad, I'm just doing my thing. I'm just messing around, whatever. And then it just slowly kind of drains out of him, and it's just so sad by the end. He just seems like a scolded little kid.
Like, he did do something wrong here, but I don't think this was the way for a parent to approach the conversation at all. Logan brings up Tabitha, which made me think, this was not my coming out experience. But I know there are a lot of coming out stories where, like, say it's a gay guy who comes out to his dad, and his dad is like, hey, what about that girl you dated in high school? Like, you guys were really cute together. What happened to that? Just turn it back into, you were capable of being normal once. Why can't we get back to that?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you had a girlfriend who was age appropriate and normal. I also thought it was funny that he said that Tabitha was hot, because that was like the first thing Roman said when he saw Tabitha, is my dad would go nuts. He's such a little weirdo. Logan was sort of willing to give him a pass when he said, like, is it just Roman being Roman to Shiv? But then Shiv was the one that just sprang on that opportunity and started saying how it's been a pattern for him, and everyone says he has these weird relationships, and everyone knows about the thing with him and Jerry, which was interesting. I mean, it's clearly not true that people knew that Jerry had like reciprocated it. It seemed like Shiv assumed that she just hadn't, stopped it for leverage, which was not the situation. And it was interesting because we have had these scenes where she kind of reacts or like glances between the two of them, like she's clearly put together that something was happening, and there was all this build up all season with the two of them, kind of pointing out each other's like weird, sexual things. And this is, I guess, what that was building to, which is so great because it's not like a thing that is planned or like predictable. It's just this like sudden like mistake that someone makes that like brings all these pieces together. I was just really impressed by this scene. It was one of my favorites of like the entire show. I just love this whole sequence.
Yeah, I will admit I really was not expecting Roman and Jerry to come out at this point, particularly because they had kind of stopped. Like nothing more was happening between them. But this was a really fantastic conclusion. And it is also interesting that you point out how Shiv had picked up on the Jerry thing. Like she also mentioned it in the second episode of the season, but no one else seems aware of this. Like it kind of is a lie as far as we know that this is a thing everyone knows about.
Yeah, she could have very well been lying about that and just, because she was obviously trying to spin this so that she could bury Roman, which she said she wanted to do, and this was her chance, and she's like shamelessly took it. And then the scene between Jerry and Shiv, not to always do the like, I saw someone on Twitter say this, but I've seen a lot of takes on Twitter that people thought that this scene was like bad for Shiv, or that like Jerry won this encounter, or that like, oh, Shiv shouldn't have tried messing with Jerry. And I'm like, what scene did you guys watch? Because I've watched this scene like 3 times trying to like see what people are seeing, and I'm like, no, went terribly for Jerry. Like you can tell, like she tries to, keep her composure at the beginning, but if all you can say is I don't recall to whether someone has previously sent you dick pics, like that is not a good retort. Like that is very incriminating, and this is not going to end well for her even if she keeps her composure in this scene. You can really see it start to slip at the end, and she just tries to get out of there, but like she's really penned in. Like this is not good for her.
Yeah, this was embarrassing for Jerry. Like it's clear she and Roman didn't really plan for an outcome like this, and I think the only thing she could have done to save herself here is to throw Roman under a bus and say like, oh, he was harassing me. That could have helped her save her job, but she didn't do that, and now she's fucked, I would say.
It's nice that she didn't do that. I mean, I guess she still could, but I mean, even like Shiv says, if she admits Roman was sexually harassing her, that's also not good for her.
Yeah, it undermines her authority if she was just allowing this to happen.
We see now like the consent issues in the relationship because she explicitly asked him to stop doing this earlier in the episode, has been really trying to lay down boundaries for the entire season, really. And he didn't listen to her. And he was just like, oh, haha, you're just saying that. And on one hand, it makes sense that Roman was like somewhat conditioned in this relationship to like think that she was just like teasing him or whatever, because that kind of had been their previous encounters where she's like, you're sick, whatever. But I don't know, it's not good. Like she did make it clear that he needed to stop, and he did not.
There's a very common sentiment, I think, among the people watching this show that Roman and Jerry is the healthiest relationship on this show, which may be true because some of the other ones are like really fucking bad.
Like maybe compared to all the other relationships on the show, perhaps, but not a high bar, guys.
Yeah, I would like to state a hot take here, which is that I think Roman and Jerry's relationship is unhealthy. Professionally, they are able to work together very well, but sexually, it has not been a good dynamic. Like, as you said, their whole dynamic was Jerry being into him jerking out near her, but denying this. And so it doesn't excuse him sending her unsolicited dick pics after she tells him to stop, but I can see how the logic kind of broke down in his head, and I think she should have been clear with him from the start. And in addition, he took her relationship with Lori this season very personally, as viewers, I think we can see that Jerry likes Roman and was just trying to protect herself by doing this, but he was not able to understand that. And I mean, we're just kind of seeing they crash and burn their terrible communication.
Let's do best line.
Words are just, nothing. Complicated airflow.
My favorite line of the episode was, I hate to say this because I love you, but you're kind of evil. We're just saying how we feel now, I guess. We're 3 seasons in and Kendall is just like, I'm going to say what I feel. I liked this line because it kind of echoed what he said to his siblings earlier in the season when he said, like, you know, I love dad, I hate dad, I'll
outsource it to my therapist.
Yeah. I mean, this line is like kind of funny and just really sad, and I think it shows the way that their like personal relationships are so enmeshed with like the impact that they're having on the world. Because, you know, the thing that's really interesting about everything that Kendall said to him is he didn't really ever make it personal. Like, he wasn't like, you have been terribly abusive to me, which he has been. He just said, you have like corrupted the American Republic and you've you're an evil person, but I love you, which is like a very different conversation than maybe even the one, I know he said that he said the things he needs to, but now I'm like, I'm not so sure. I think he needs to actually make things personal with his dad for once and be like, the way you have treated me is terrible.
Yeah.
Just objectively awful. So, I don't know, like there's just a lot, there's a lot going on in that line. And I like it.
I mean, his whole thing at the beginning of the season was, I did this for you. Just to random people who he definitely didn't do it for. And he still hasn't acknowledged, I think, why he actually did the press conference. Like, I think it was in part the NRPI thing. But very largely, he was upset with his dad because his dad treats him absolutely horribly.
He can't really acknowledge the way that he's been treated by Logan except to say, like, he was going to send me to jail. Like, he did things worse than that to you, my dear.
Yeah. So, my favorite line of this episode was, you're my onion.
Aww.
This is kind of a cheesy line, but I think it works because of the way they leaned into it. I really love the concept of being someone's onion, the person in the world most capable of causing them pain.
Yes.
There were a lot of Caroline, Shiv, and Logan Kendall parallels in this episode, as you've mentioned, and I would say that Logan and Kendall are both each other's onions.
Yeah, I love that. Well, now that we are getting to the end of our time here, we finally get to talk about the pool scene and Kendall and what it means for the next episode and what we think and where do we go from here, all of that. I think a couple things just to point out about this scene is he did seem to be drugged a little bit. I mean, the way that his head kind of started slipping to one side and he dropped his beer into the pool, you know, maybe mixed something with alcohol, which I think could be like ambiguously a suicide attempt if he was like, I'm gonna do these drugs and then just kind of lay in the pool. I don't know. I also don't know that it was that. Like, there's just a lot to say about this scene.
At the beginning of this scene, watching for the first time, I was wondering if he was already dead. Like, before they showed his face, he was just there.
That would be so dark. His kids are just like, Dad?
I know.
Dad?
And I will say, I am leaning towards it was not an attempt, and maybe nothing happened. Like, let me back up. Watching this scene, I mean, as a Kendall stan, he's my favorite character, it was a very upsetting shot to look at, but it was also less committal than I had expected if anything was going to happen in this episode. And I did find myself after the episode going, okay, let me see what people are saying about this scene, because I'm not sure how to interpret it. Like, I'm not sure that it's saying that anything definitely happened. And I would hope that he wouldn't attempt anything in front of his kids, if anything.
Right. No, I think, because, yeah, like, Rava isn't even there. It just seems like something he wouldn't do on purpose.
Yeah, I think it would be like an accidental overdose, if anything. But I am leaning towards maybe it's not even that. Just knowing these writers, I feel like they are the types who would go, so we're going to do this shot of Kendall in a pool, kind of taking on water. Symbolically, he is maybe dying. His life is on the line. He's going to be reborn.
That's where I'm at now after sitting with this episode for a few days. Like, I think when I first watched it, I was saying no, because, you know, we had thought that something might happen to Kendall. So I think, like, going into the scene with the expectation of, like, he might die kind of, like, set you up for the expectation that the scene was, like, worse than it actually really looks like if you watch it. Like, I think the only thing that does seem bad is the way he does seem to be, like, somewhat unconscious with the way his kind of, like, slips, like, further into the water and stuff. So that's the thing that gives me concern, but I also think that it's very possible that all he was doing is just being like, I'm going to put my head in the water and see how long I can stay alive, like the waiter did, like I've been thinking about, and then he's just, like, super depressed and drops his beer bottle, which sounds really silly, but wouldn't Kendall do that? So all I'm saying is I think there is a chance that the next episode starts and, like, we never even, like, really find out. Like he just shows up to the wedding and is fine. Like, that's honestly what I'm expecting to happen. And I think people are going to be mad about that, but that's not my fault.
I think it is another one of those things about watching an episode or watching a season week by week where you come to expect something to come of everything.
And of course, it doesn't help that all the critics who saw the episode early were like, you have to watch this one live, which really built people up for, like, something really big is going to happen.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, it's like, did something big happen?
We
don't know. We won't know until next week.
There were a lot of people, too, saying that this would be, like, a fitting conclusion to his arc, and I don't agree if Kendall died here. I think that makes me think of, like, stories that end with, like, wouldn't that be fucked up if that happened? Because this whole show has been Logan saying, like, Kendall is weak, a drug addict, she's just gonna end up dead in someone's pool. So for that to actually happen, then it'd just be like, okay, what did we do all that for?
The scene between Logan and Kendall did feel like it reached a conclusion of sorts, but the more I think about it, like I even did when we were recording this, and I was like, wait, he never even really said anything personal to his dad, which I think is, like, a big step that relationship still has to take. And the fact that the manslaughter thing hasn't come back for him in a real way, it does feel like, I don't know that his arc is done. And like you said, what did we do this for if at the end Kendall just gives up and he's not made for this world like Logan told him? He's just like, yeah, you're right, I'm not made for this world, I'm just gonna die. That's pretty depressing. And, like, not that the show isn't depressing sometimes, but we haven't really seen it go to that extent where it's like, we're gonna permanently end this character on this low note. I mean, that would be pretty dark.
And I think it would also be too easy if Kendall got to escape in this way. I mean, that is what he wanted in this episode, out of the family, and to die would just get him free of all the consequences completely, which I don't think is compelling. I think you have to live with the shitty thing you did for the rest of your life.
Which is a really good segue to Bojack Horseman, which I wanted to talk about because I'm a big fan of the show, and a lot of these conversations that we've been having are very similar to conversations that fans of that show had going into the last season, which is, will Bojack die? What would that look like? What would that mean for the arc of the show? And, like, they're different shows, I understand. It's like, it's an animated comedy, maybe a little bit more of a comedy than Succession is, but also is it? And I think that it just feels like thematically very similar, down to overdosing in a pool. Like, there are a lot of very similar things about what is happening to Kendall right now, and things that fans brought up for Bojack is that he would be able to, like, escape some of the consequences. He would become, like, a martyr in a way, which doesn't necessarily feel true to the character. He has to actually make things right and, like, become a better person for that arc to feel, like, real. And also, I guess if you just want to say, like, you know, maybe doing 6 seasons about an addict and having him die in an overdose is just, like, not perhaps, like, not the best thing you could do in a show. I mean, that's a little dark. And now to this show, to Succession, I don't want to fall into a trap of being like, I think that Kendall's going to have like a heroic arc. Like, I know season 2 kind of got my expectations up about like he's going to, you know, fight the good fight, and
It got us all.
he got us. I still liked what they did with this season, and I think it makes a lot of sense, but I think I'm like starting to have those expectations again, where I think like he might confess to the manslaughter, for instance, is like a thing he could do to bring Logan down. I think I like the idea of that, but also, does that make him a hero? Does that feel like it's not really in line with what we've actually seen from him in the show, and it's just kind of this like hope? Does that feel too similar to the end of season 2, where it's like, once again, he makes a big announcement and now we all have to react to it for another season? So I'm not sure. I guess I've been like thinking about that as what I think might happen, is that he will confess to it in some kind of public way, but also I'm like, I'm not so sure.
Because of the podcast, as we mentioned before, that is something I'm also thinking is going to come back in some way in the finale, though I have trouble seeing them doing that clear of like a happy ending, and it would be a bit repetitive. I'm sure it'd be unpacked next season how good of a thing it was he was doing there. And I think very similarly to Bojack, this is a show about status quo. Like, it doesn't really change, and Jesse has said in interviews he doesn't think people can change. And I think that if Kendall lives and like continues to try to do better and never fully makes it, I think that is in line with what I feel are the themes of the show, same as with Bojack. Like, the whole Dream Song 29 poem, it's Henry could not make good for like the rest of his life. He continued to be haunted by this and try to make good, and that's where I see this going. I am hesitant to make any concrete predictions.
That's really good. That poem, that's a good point. He has to live with it. He can't escape it. He wanted to. He tried to. That's why he went back to Logan. Logan offered him a chance to, erase it and just go back to how things were before. But Logan said, like, a rich kid kills a boy. That's all you'll ever be. And it is. Like, it is all, like, in his heart. Like, that, I think, is all he'll ever be.
It is.
That one mistake.
I don't think, looking at him objectively, that is all he'll ever be, but to himself.
Let's close out the week with buy or sell.
Sell seems cool.
So I am selling Roman. I bought Roman in our very first episode, and this has been a very profitable season for him, but now I can see the tide is starting to turn. Even setting aside sending a dick pic to your dad, I still don't feel like Logan was really taking Roman seriously. I feel like Roman is kind of his Sherpa now, and if Roman wants a top job, he's going to have to not just tell his dad what he wants to hear, but really take it from him. And then I am buying Lucas. Lucas hasn't had much screen time in his 2 episodes, but in that time he has managed to manipulate the Roys very well, I would say, and maneuver himself into a much better deal, either with the Roys or with one of the many other companies that seem to want to work with him.
Very true. He is in a good position right now. This week I am buying Kendall because he's not dead. He's not dead, and he is beginning to be at the place he needs to be, like, emotionally. He has given up on his crusade. He's thinking more realistically about the future, even if it's like unknowable for him right now. And he finally truly wants out from not only the company, but his relationship with his dad. Whether or not he gets these things, I'm glad he's at the point where he's acknowledging it. I think that is a big step for him.
I love that you're buying my boy and I'm selling yours.
Don't sell my boy. That's my boy.
I love him too, but you understand.
I get it. I still have Roman in the bank because I'm selling Jerry, who I bought in episode 1. Unfortunately, she may be taking the brunt of the consequences for Roman's mistake here. She is pretty penned in, and despite her tendency to avoid mess, she has found herself in the middle of a huge one. So, good luck, Jerry. The Jerry Hive will assassinate me for saying that I don't think she has it together right now. It's not her fault. I mean, it's like, I guess, like, that's the thing. It's like, it's not her fault, but you guys do need to take your girl boss glasses off and look at Jerry objectively in that scene, and then tell me that she won that encounter with Shiv. That is fucking absurd. And those posts have, like, thousands of likes on Twitter. I'm so mad. No one watches the show correctly except for us.
Yeah. I think the Jerry Hive is going to assassinate you just for your delivery of good luck, Jerry. Like, there's so much contempt dripping from that.
Okay, Jerry's fine. Like, I'm not the biggest Jerry fan. Like, I don't wish ill on her, but...
Yeah. The way I feel about Jerry at this point is in Shit Show when Chip was like, I like Jerry, like, really unconvincingly.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't love Jerry, but I don't hate Jerry.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how I feel about Jerry.
Exactly.
Like, she's fine.
We're really sorry if Jerry is your number one MILF.
You're in good company. You can find lots of other people who love Jerry, but we love Caroline in this house.
I was more of a Jerry fan in the early seasons, though she was never one of my favorites, but by now I'm just kind of burnt out on all the girl boss sentiment surrounding her.
Yeah, I think the actual character is more interesting than the way that people, like, ever talk about her.
She is. Like, that scene with Shiv is way more interesting if Jerry lost in that scene.
Well, we will be back next week for one last time for the finale. It's very exciting.
Very bittersweet.
I don't know what's gonna happen. Hopefully we'll be right that Kendall's not dead, otherwise we're gonna look like fools, but I think we're right. I'm, like, pretty confident in that, so
yeah,
we'll find
same.
out.
And if not, y'all just have to hear us cry on air, so...
Oh my god, yeah.
Prepare
It'll
for
be
that.
rough. We just won't come back. If Kendall's dead, I walk.
If next Wednesday there is just no video from us, you know what happened.
Alright, thank you for listening. See you next week.
Yeah, tell us your favorites in the comments. Maybe Tom could actually be the one running off with an Italian girl.
He deserves it at this point. Tom deserves to have a little fling and just, like, make Shiv actually be afraid of losing him.
Someone needs to, like, instill the fear of God in her just a little. And I think it needs to be, like, it needs to be a girl. I don't think if, like, he had a fling with Greg, I don't think she would take that seriously.
No. I'm trying to imagine her even reaction to that.
She would just be like, what, why? And, like, moves on.
Like, Greg. Why? That would be really funny. You have an affair with my cousin? Why?
It'd be funny.
Just, like, not threatened at all. That would be hilarious.
And then she starts talking about her job again.